The story begins at a fancy art event in a gallery. When the party ends and everyone leaves, a woman named Susan sits alone. She looks sad and distant, like something is bothering her deep inside. Later, she goes back to her big, expensive house, but even there, she can't relax. That night, she can't sleep, so she turns on the TV and keeps it on until morning. The next day, her butler tells her there's a package in the mailbox. She opens it and finds a book. It's a novel written by her ex-husband, Edward. He has written a note saying that Susan inspired him to write this book after she left him. He wants her to read it before anyone else does. He also says he's in Los Angeles and would like to meet her again. The book is called Nocturnal Animals, and something about the name makes Susan feel uncomfortable. Later, her current husband, Hutton, comes home. Their relationship seems cold. He didn't come to her gallery event, and he didn't sleep in their bed the night before. He says he was busy with work, but Susan doesn't believe him. She asks him to go on a short trip together, but he says he has to fly to New York again, even though he just came back from there. We learn that Hutton's business is struggling, and they may be losing money. That evening, they go to a dinner party. Susan talks quietly to a friend and shares her feelings. Even though she has a rich life, a big house, a good job, and high status, she still feels unhappy and empty. Her friend talks about her own marriage, which makes Susan think more about how bad things are with Hutton. At home, Susan takes sleeping pills, but instead of sleeping, she starts reading Edward's book. It's dedicated to her. The story grabs her attention right away. The book starts with a man named Tony, his wife Laura, and their daughter India. They're driving on a quiet road in West Texas. It's peaceful and far from any town. Tony enjoys the quiet, but his daughter is upset because her phone doesn't work. After some time, two strange cars appear ahead of them. The cars block the road and won't let Tony pass. When he tries, they act mean and start following him. One of the cars hits his car from behind, so Tony pulls over. Some men get out and pretend to help, saying there's a flat tire. They pressure Tony to get out and then tell him to bring his wife and daughter out too, saying they need to fix the tire. Things get scary. One man starts bothering Tony's daughter. When Tony tries to stop him, the man hits him. Tony doesn't fight back. Once the tire is fixed, Tony's wife and daughter try to get back into the car, but before Tony can reach them, the men take the car and drive away with him inside. Tony is left standing alone, shocked and helpless. This part of the book upsets Susan a lot. She puts the book down, feeling scared and sad. She calls Hutton, but Hutton is in a hotel with another woman. He talks to Susan calmly, but she notices something strange in what he says. She figures out that he is lying and probably with someone else. She ends the call, feeling hurt and heartbroken. Back in the story, Tony is still with one of the men named Lou makes Tony drive to another place, acting like everything is fine. Tony is desperate to find his family. They stop near a trailer where Tony sees his car, but not his wife or daughter. Lou tells him not to worry and drives away, leaving Tony alone in the middle of nowhere. Tony walks along the road all night. The next morning, he finds a small house and asks for help. A police officer named Bobby meets him and begins an investigation. Tony shows him where everything happened. Bobby doesn't understand why Tony didn't fight harder since the men didn't have any weapons. They search the area together and find a terrible scene. Tony's wife and daughter are dead, lying on a red sofa, left like trash in the open land. Susan stops reading again. She starts crying. Her mind goes back to when she first met Edward in New York. He looked a lot like Tony from the book, except without a beard. Both Edward and Susan were from Texas and had met in university. Edward had come to town for a scholarship interview, and Susan was in grad school. They went out for dinner, and their feelings for each other grew. Another memory appears. Susan is talking with her mother at dinner. They are having an argument. Susan wants to marry Edward and move back to Texas, but her mother doesn't agree. She thinks Edward isn't good enough and won't be able to give Susan the kind of life she is used to. Her mother warns that Susan will regret it someday, and says Susan is more like her than she wants to admit. Susan disagrees, but the words stay in her mind. Back in the present, Susan writes an email to Edward. She tells him the book has affected her deeply and asks if they can meet. The novel continues. Tony gets an email from Officer Bobby with a photo of someone named Turk. Tony recognizes him as one of the men who took his family. But Turk has disappeared, and no one knows where he is. Many months pass, but nothing new happens. Tony becomes a different person. He shaves off his beard, but his face looks full of sadness. He is still waiting for justice that never comes. Then, Bobby calls Tony with news. 3 men tried to rob a store. 1 died, 1 escaped, and 1 was caught. The man who died was Turk. Bobby asks Tony to come to the station to see if he can identify the man they caught. Tony goes to the police station and immediately recognizes the man. It's Lou, the same one who left him in the desert. Lou tries to pretend he doesn't know Tony, but Tony reminds him of what happened. Bobby tells Tony that Lou will be charged with murder. They have Tony's statement and fingerprint from the trailer. Bobby also believes that the 3rd man, named Ray, is the leader of the group from that horrible night. Tony is now deeply focused on finding Ray. He wants justice for what happened to his wife and daughter. Bobby, the kind police officer helping him, promises that he won't stop until they catch Ray. He knows how important this is for Tony. At the same time, Susan is back at work in her office, but her thoughts are far away. She looks tired and lost. Her assistant reminds her about a meeting, but Susan is clearly distracted. She hasn't been sleeping well. She remembers something from her past. Edward used to call her a nocturnal animal because she stayed up late, thinking too much. Now she realizes that Edward chose that name for his book for a reason. The story he wrote feels very personal, not just made up. It reminds her of their life together and everything they went through. Susan starts thinking about her time with Edward. She once really loved him, but she didn't believe he would succeed as a writer. She thought he needed to be more practical. Looking back, she sees that she hurt him by not trusting his dreams. She also remembers choosing Hutton instead, someone who looked smart, rich, and full of confidence. But now she wonders if she chose the wrong person. Later, Susan joins a meeting at her company. The team is talking about firing an employee. Susan doesn't agree. She says they should give the woman another chance because the company believed in her before. A man at the table reminds Susan that she was the one who wanted big changes in the company. Susan quietly says that not all changes are good ones. She sounds like she's talking about her own life, not just the business. In Edward's novel, Bobby brings Tony to a place where Ray was last seen. There is no strong proof against Ray. His fingerprints weren't found, and he has no criminal record. But Tony is very sure that Ray is the man from that horrible night. Bobby and Tony talk to Ray calmly and ask him to come with them. As they drive, Bobby asks Ray questions. He wants to know if Ray remembers the car or the road. Ray says he knows nothing. They take him back to the trailer where everything happened. Tony asks Ray to explain what he did that night, but Ray keeps saying he's innocent. Tony becomes very upset and emotional. He can't hold back and ends up hitting Ray as painful memories flood back into his mind. Susan then remembers a painful time in her life. Long ago, Edward showed her some of his writing. She told him it wasn't good enough. She wanted him to find a normal job instead of chasing a dream. Edward felt sad and hurt. Susan thought she was being honest, but it only made things worse. They had a big fight, especially when Edward said she was acting like her mother, who was always cold and critical. Later, when Susan was still in school, she met Hutton. He was very different from Edward. He seemed successful, strong, and sure of himself. She would later marry Hutton, hoping for a better life. But now she's not so sure that she made the right choice. Back in the novel, Bobby tells Tony that Ray has been set free. There wasn't enough proof to keep him locked up. Tony feels hopeless again, and Bobby shares some sad news. He is very sick with lung cancer. Doctors say he might have only 1 year left to live. He has been asked to retire, but Bobby doesn't want to stop. He wants to finish this case for Tony. He feels it's the last important thing he can do. Susan's mind returns to a sad memory. She remembers going to a medical clinic with Hutton. She had just ended a pregnancy, and the baby was Edward's. Afterward, she cried in the car, feeling full of regret. She worried that Edward would find out. Hutton told her not to worry. But then, to her shock, she saw Edward outside. He had found out and was crying. That heartbreaking moment showed her how deeply she had hurt him. It also showed how much pain he must have put into writing the character of Tony in his story. The last part of Edward's book begins. Bobby takes Ray to a secret place in the woods and keeps him there. Soon after, another officer brings Lou, the other man from that night, to the same place. Bobby is very sick and too weak to go on, so he gives Tony a gun and steps outside to rest. Suddenly, Lou tries to escape. Bobby shoots him, but Ray runs away into the dark. Tony goes after him, full of anger and sadness. He finds Ray hiding in an old trailer and points the gun at him. Ray laughs, thinking Tony won't shoot. Then Ray says cruel things about what happened that night. He even says he enjoyed it. This makes Tony very angry, and he finally shoots Ray. But Ray hits Tony in the face with a metal bar before dying. Tony wakes up later, hurt and dizzy. He can't see from one eye and can barely move. He slowly walks outside, kicking Ray's body on the way. But then something terrible happens. Tony trips and falls on his own gun. He gets badly hurt. He lies in the dirt, breathing heavily. Slowly, he closes his eyes and dies alone, far from anyone who could help. Susan finishes reading the story. She sits in a quiet bath, lost in her thoughts. Her mind is full of memories of Edward. She can't stop thinking about him. Later that night, while lying in bed, she gets an email from Edward. He wants to meet her and asks when and where they can meet. The next day, Susan gets ready carefully. She picks out a nice outfit, takes off her wedding ring, and looks in the mirror. For the first time in a while, she feels a little hopeful. She goes to a restaurant, expecting to see Edward again. She waits for a long time, but Edward never arrives. Susan sits alone at the table. As time passes, she starts to cry. She thinks about everything she gave up, her love for Edward, the baby, her chance at happiness. Now she has everything she once thought she wanted, but it doesn't mean anything. Her life feels empty. The quiet around her says more than words ever could.
Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.